Senate Bill 5664, implementing the IdentiCard program to provide individuals a Washington State issued IdentiCard. Brian.
Thank you, Senator Hobbs, members of the committee, Brian Moore, committee staff. Senate Bill 5664 deals with establishing a program for homeless individuals to have an IdentiCard. In way of background, the Department of Licensing issues an IdentiCard, which is valid for up to 6 years. In order to do that, the individual must not hold a Washington State driver's license, provide information regarding their identity, pay the required statutory fee of $54. Under current law, there are provisions that allow certain individuals to receive a at-cost IdentiCard. So, for example, homeless youth are allowed to receive a at-cost IdentiCard under current law. What this bill would do, subject to the availability of funds, is provide that the Department of Commerce and the Department of Licensing would create and implement an IdentiCard program to provide homeless individuals in Washington State a state-issued IdentiCard at no cost. They would only be eligible for this no-cost IdentiCard on a one-time basis. In order to get this IdentiCard, they would have to show proof of identity, meet the definition of sheltered or unsheltered homeless person, and be expected to reside in Washington State and not have a current or valid state-issued IdentiCard or driver's license. The fiscal impact is estimated. It varies a little bit if it's at the implementation phase or the actual or the startup phase. The initial biennium is $385,000 and then an ongoing biennial cost of approximately $355,000. This is based upon an assumption, which is, we don't really know, but based upon a similar program in Illinois of about 15,000 individuals per year qualifying for this IdentiCard.
Does anyone have any questions? Senator Loveland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What kind of identification would a homeless person be required to produce in order to get one of these cards?
The Department of Licensing, who might better be able to speak to this, has a list of what they list as A and B type documents to prove that identity. But for example, under the current practice, a homeless shelter can certify that the individual is who they say they are with certain requirements on them. And then it also includes the typical type documents to prove identity, birth certificate, other forms, passport, other forms of documentation.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions? Thank you, Brian. Senator Cleveland, this is your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, very much. Well, for the record, my name is Annette Cleveland. I serve as state senator representing the 49th Legislative District, which encompasses a good part of America's Vancouver as well as parts of Clark County. And I bring this bill forward today because obviously every community in our state's been grappling with how to address homelessness. And there's no one solution. There are no easy answers. Now, while here in the legislature, we've made progress in passing bills, particularly last session, to aid in addressing the homelessness crisis. We need to continue examining ways to assist those without a safe place to live. And so this bill represents one of the barriers that many who are homeless face, and that barrier is a lack of identification. You know, as I was putting this bill together, when you think about all the many instances that each one of us are required to show ID on a regular basis, I think it's easy to understand what a barrier lack of ID can be. So I bring the bill forward also on behalf of a constituent of mine from the 49th Legislative District. He's devoted the last few years to helping those who face homelessness, and through this work he determined that if a government-issued ID were made available to homeless individuals, homelessness might be prevented in the first place. So I know he's here today. I know he'll share more information and answer any questions you might have. So with that, thank you, Chair Hobbs, for allowing the bill to be heard today and for your willingness to encourage this discussion, recognizing that this is a fiscal committee. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cleveland. Does anyone else have any questions of Senator Cleveland? Okay, thank you very much. Senator Saldana.
We have two people willing to testify, and we will have Red Brown and Ronald Rasmussen come forward. In addition, we have another 6 that have signed up, all pro, but not wishing to testify at this time.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. For the record, my name is Ron Rasmussen. I live in America's Vancouver, and I'm also the president of the board of directors of Hand Up Project, a 501c3 nonprofit organization which seeks to provide innovative services to the homeless. I support Senate Bill 5664, which will make a Washington state ID card free for the homeless. With this bill, homeless people can restart their lives, apply for jobs, regain some degree of self-esteem, and apply for benefits and programs, and in many cases, move from being tax consumers to tax producers. By some estimates, it costs the taxpayers about $40,000 per year to keep someone homeless in terms of recycling through various law enforcement programs, recycling through drug and alcohol programs, and the cost of various charitable efforts as well. When we compare $40,000 per year to the cost of a Washington state ID card, this is a good investment of taxpayer dollars, and this bill will also improve the lives of many people who want to contribute to society. There are thousands of homeless people across the state of Washington, many of whom want to restart their lives. Please support this legislation, Senate Bill 5664. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hobbs. My name is Rod Brown. My normal job is the chair of the Whatcom County Council. Prior to that, I started and built a multinational business. I'm here today to testify for something that was a result of a exploration 2 years ago trying to find low barrier employment for homeless kids. I found the work was relatively easy. There was a lot of support in the community, but the statement was that the kids had to turn up with photo ID and a social security number. I then discovered that half the kids on the street that we see today, in fact, a large percentage of the homeless population, are unable to comply with it, and many of them simply cannot get that identification. Most of us start out life, or all of us in this room, my guess is, have the benefit of 4 aces up our sleeve. And those 4 aces are our birth certificate, our social security number, our state-issued ID, and our passport. The problem is over the years, we've made the requirement for ID essential for basically everything. And with the introduction of the Real ID Act and the federal E-Verify program, we've tightened up the rules and regulations requiring on how you get ID. We've provided no resources to make it easy to do so. The net result is that those legislations has had an unintended consequence of denying approximately 21 million Americans the ability to have access to ID, and those numbers are from 2006. The reason this has become so important is because ID is the gateway to participate basically in every single thing we do in life, from getting a job to renting an apartment to joining the National Guard or joining the military, even to things like donating blood or gathering your parents' remains and giving them a decent burial. The unintended consequences have resulted in a segment of the community that has effectively become ID-less. They have no identity, and those that I've spoken to complain about feeling like they're non-persons. And the reality is when you become homeless, you're walking out the door with everything of value on you, and the homeless lose their materials or lose their identification very quickly because they're victims of theft. If you think being homeless is hard, when homeless without ID is hopelessness because there is no way off the street. I've been working for the last 2 years now understanding this issue. I've traveled across the state at my own expense to visit with programs in other parts of the country. The thing that is absolutely staggering, and to Senator Hobbs, to your original comment about at the start of the session about the economics or the fiscal impact, the numbers in Florida, for example, where they have a program that has, they help 2,500 people a year regain their identification, or in Phoenix, where it's 9,000 people a year. Those people, 70% of them are seeking ID so that they can get a job. Half of those people will have employment within 30 days because they'll do work nobody else will do. The fiscal impact is really simple. It costs us on average to provide a person with identification. It costs us, in Florida, the average is about $250 for a fully staffed operation. That person saves about $40,000 a year in social services, emergency room visits, and incarceration. In short, the payback is 160 to 1. In this bill, you're talking about providing identification cards for the homeless for free. I understand there's also an amendment designed to, being proposed to extend that to birth certificates, and I fully support that. With those two documents, we could probably take 14,000 people a year off the streets in Washington State. I have a presentation in this in detail, which is built on a deck of playing cards. With your permission, I will give it to your staff to hand out to each of you.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions? Sarah Lovelet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering from a physical piece of paper standpoint, so say you wanted to get a copy of your birth certificate, is it possible for us to create a program or some kind of companion piece to this where we have an interagency ability to share that information? I guess it's a hypothetical for this body to think about. That way, if you have your person coming in trying to verify their identity, say the Department of Licensing has the ability to interact with different county jurisdictions to find those birth certificates. I don't know if that's possible, but just thought I'd throw that out there.
I can address it if you wish. So the birth certificates are held by the state of Washington. There is interagency agreements between the Department of Licensing and the state of Washington Health Department, and also interagency agreements between other similar jurisdictions in other countries, other states. I want to correct one bit of misinformation, as I heard earlier. A homeless shelter does not have the ability to write a letter and say, we've identified this person. The process of proving your identity is astonishingly difficult at the moment, and it's going to get worse because one of the discussions that the Department of Health is having is to significantly make it more difficult to get a copy of your birth certificate. In most states now, you cannot get a copy of your birth certificate without first producing photo ID, often in person, and you can't get issued photo ID without first producing your birth certificate. Effectively, it's a catch-22.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Thank you for all the work you do. I appreciate that and coming in here and